Together, a pair of Nobel Prize-winning discoveries could make it possible to pause the clocks ticking down inside of us and then wind them backwards, not in our children or grandchildren's lifetimes, but ours. What you're about to see has been described as breathtaking, almost mystical. It's potentially the biggest change in our understanding of biology since the discovery of the double helix, and it may give us the ability to live long enough to live forever. Today, you'll be shown how close we are to solving one of mankind's greatest challenges: how to live forever.
Hello, my name is Michael Robinson, and I want to ask you, how long do you want to live? It's not such a strange question when you consider how advances in medicine, antibiotics, new surgeries, prescription drugs have continuously extended our lives. But what is the maximum possible lifespan of a human being? The answer comes from Dr. David Sinclair of Harvard's genetics department. It's going to inspire you to rethink your future, your understanding of mortality, and the very concept of death. Dr. Sinclair has announced that because of recent medical breakthroughs, there is no limit on the human lifespan. His colleagues at Harvard, MIT, Penn, Scripps, and Johns Hopkins, they have helped develop a treatment that could be the first step toward a permanent cure for mankind's most deadly disease: aging. They may have just unlocked our ability to switch on an immortality gene. You might be surprised to hear that we've already identified 9 species that have a naturally occurring immortality gene. These animals simply don't age. Some of them you probably know. Look at the lobster. As they get older, lobsters continue to grow larger, stronger, and more fertile. Aging is not a death sentence for them. In fact, there are only 2 main ways that lobsters can die. They get eaten by us or another animal, or they grow so large their own shell kills them. Not a pretty picture, I know. However, it demonstrates that if you removed outside threats, lobsters can nearly achieve immortality. In fact, there is another animal that already has. It's called Turritopsis dohrnii. It's also known as the immortal jellyfish. Anytime it gets sick or injured, it sinks to the ocean floor, transforms back into a polyp, and reemerges as a newborn. It biologically turns back the hands of time. Without predators, they would live forever. Another animal with an immortality gene is the red sea urchin. As it ages, it regenerates damaged parts infinitely. It never really dies. This led Dr. Kevin Peterson, a molecular biologist at Dartmouth, to make a very important observation. He has concluded that immortality is much more common than we think. Dr. Peterson is right. And here's what's really extraordinary. You and I, we all have an immortality gene hidden inside our DNA. And now, thanks to 2 genetic breakthroughs, both of which have won a Nobel Prize in medicine, and after decades of experimentation and recent human clinical trials, doctors have developed a treatment that could allow us to switch on our very own immortality gene. So first, we're going to closely examine these breakthroughs. Imagine never losing a memory or forgetting a face. Imagine returning to your sexual peak. Imagine both looking and feeling like you're 30 again. Now, that could all be possible, and that's just for starters. Here's what this all means. If the effects of these breakthroughs are combined, there could be only one way to distinguish the average 90-year-old from a 30-year-old. Ask them their birthday. But before I can show you how you could become biologically immortal, let's first talk about why we die. When you set aside accidents, trauma, and injuries, as you see, 7 of the top 10 causes of death in America are all age-related. And you can trace the root cause of all of these conditions to one specific cellular defect. So let's take a look at that right now. What's on your screen is an individual gene. Genes determine our eye color, our height, the structure of our bodies, literally everything. All of our genes are strung together in a long sequence called DNA. You've probably seen this before. It's the famous double helix. Our DNA is extremely fragile, which is why it's enclosed in a protective case, what we call chromosomes. They're in the nucleus of every cell in our body. Now, let's take a look at the tiny caps on the tips of our chromosomes. These are called telomeres. Their job is to keep the chromosomes tightly wrapped around our DNA so it doesn't mutate. A defect with these telomeres is the primary reason we get weaker and sicker over time. This is why aging eventually kills us. Here's how to understand this. As we age, cells die off and are replenished through cytokinesis. Cytokinesis is the process where cells repeatedly duplicate. They make copies of themselves. But here's the problem. Every time your cells duplicate, the telomeres, the protection of your DNA shrinks just a little bit. Let's look at the original cell and compare it to one 40 copies down the line. As you can see, the telomeres in the 40th copy are significantly smaller than the original. The DNA is exposed. It's almost unprotected. Because of this defect in our telomeres, human cells can only divide about 60 times before our DNA becomes unreadable. This is why we die. In fact, I'm going to show you my own death. And I'm going to use this photocopier to do it. This is a picture of me. I've made one copy. Now you can still clearly see my picture in this copy. However, it's a little more degraded than the original. Now, what happens when, instead of using the original, I take this copied picture and make a copy of it? This copy of a copy has gotten blurrier. There are more imperfections. Now I'm going to repeat this process again and again, taking each new copy and making a copy of it until I have a total of 60. So what are you truly witnessing? I'm fading away. You are watching me die. This is what's happening inside of our bodies. As the telomeres on the ends of our chromosomes shrink with each copy that's made, we fade away from our peak. It's why, if you're over 50 like me, you've started having senior moments, because this process has already shrunk your brain by 10 to 15%. It's dissolved 30% of the collagen in your skin, which is why it becomes looser and is starting to wrinkle. It's why your muscle mass has started to melt away, even if you're diligent about exercising, because aging erodes your body's ability to produce growth hormones. Our vision and hearing falter. Our bones become more brittle. Our sex drive slows down. These are all symptoms that every human experiences as we age. And eventually, it's the reason we all die. So how is it possible that lobsters, sea urchins, jellyfish, at least 9 types of animals never grow biologically older? What has granted these animals immortality, and how can we replicate it? Turns out 2 biologists at UC Berkeley, Dr. Carol Greeter and Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, provided the first part of the answer. It was hiding in one of these immortal organisms, the tetrahymena. In the tetrahymena, just like in humans, telomeres degrade during cytokinesis. However, they differ from us in that they have a unique gene switched on. This gene creates a protein called telomerase. After cytokinesis, telomerase goes to work immediately, restoring the telomeres to their full length. The official term for this is immortalization. When telomerase is present, each cell is immortalized. It's able to function at 100% full strength, no matter how many times it has copied itself. The discovery of telomerase earned Dr. Greeter and Dr. Blackburn the 2009 Nobel Prize in Medicine. And here's the good news. Every cell in your body has this exact immortality gene. When it's switched on, your cells don't age. In fact, they become biologically younger. So that's the good news. Unfortunately, there's some bad news that comes along with it. When we're brought into this world, when we're born, we come with this gene switched off. This is what scientists have been working to reverse. Now, when I'm talking about a gene being switched on or switched off, here's what I mean. Let's take a closer look at our cells again. Inside our cells, we have chromosomes. Encased inside our chromosomes are tightly wrapped coils of DNA. Now, here's the final piece of the puzzle. It's called RNA. The job of RNA is to deliver the instructions from our genes to the rest of the cell. When scientists say a gene is switched on, what they really mean to say is the gene is creating RNA. So, when the immortality gene is switched on, that gene starts creating the RNA for telomerase. Now, before human experiments could be conducted, scientists had to determine that they could switch on the immortality gene in other animals. Animals that, just like us, were born with it switched off. And they started with mice. Now, Mice don't look much like us, but when you get down to their DNA, we're about 90% similar. Parts of our genome are actually 99% identical. At the Spanish National Cancer Research Center, doctors successfully switched on the immortality gene in a group of mice. They did it by injecting them with modified DNA, which activated high levels of the telomerase gene. The normal lifespan of a mouse is about 2 years. However, with telomerase switched on, in other words, with the immortality gene switched on, they lived 40% longer. That's the equivalent of adding an additional 32 years to your life. At Harvard Medical School, geneticist Dr. Ronald DePinho led a team that repeated this experiment with almost identical results. After 4 weeks of treatment, their conclusions were stunning. Aged mice had undergone remarkable signs of rejuvenation. Their cells experienced a powerful regenerative response. Muscle tissue was rejuvenated. They described what they saw as an unprecedented reversal of age-related decline. And Dr. DePinho himself said this was akin to the Ponce de Leon effect. If you know your history, that's the explorer who went searching for the fountain of youth. And Harvard is now suggesting they've found it. But would it work in human cells? The answer is yes. In a 24-week clinical trial, they used very small levels of telomerase activation. The trial involved 36 men between the ages of 60 and 85. Just look at these results. After 6 weeks, the men's vision had improved by 20%. At 12 weeks, symptoms of erectile dysfunction were disappearing. And 24 weeks in, they had a 14% increase in the measurable strength of their immune systems. By the end of the trial, the men had literally aged backward on a biological level between 5 and 20 years. That bears repeating. By switching on the smallest possible level of telomerase, they turned back the clock on 2 decades of aging. And they accomplished this with only 6 months of treatment. Stanford microbiologist Dr. Helen Blau has declared that we can turn back the clock by many years. And all it takes to see this dramatic reversal is just a few days. In other words, it's possible that human beings can age backwards with no deadly side effects. By 2018, the anti-aging market is projected to hit $345.8 billion a year. We're talking about a treatment that unlocks the ability for your body to become younger on a biological level.